Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. Written by Hakim Abul Qasim Ferdowsi Tusi. Translated by Helen Ziman. Transcribed and narrated by Lore Enchanter. Chapter 4. Zal and Rodabeh. Anon, it happened that Zal wanted to visit the kingdom. He set forth with a splendid entourage, and after traveling for a while, they arrived in Cabul with great pomp. In Cabul, Mihrab, who was a descendant of Zohak the serpent, ruled as the king. Despite his lineage, he was worthy, wise, and prudent. Upon hearing that the son of Sam, to whom he paid tribute, was approaching the city, Mihrab went out to meet him, accompanied by his nobles and slaves carrying valuable gifts. Zal, upon learning of Mihrab's arrival, organized a feast in his tents, and Mihrab and his entourage dined with him until late into the night. After the king had departed, Zal praised Mihrab's beauty. At that moment, a nobleman stood up and said to him,
"O Zal, you have not truly witnessed beauty until you have seen this man's daughter. She is as graceful as a slender cypress, her face shines brighter than the sun, and her lips resemble a blooming pomegranate flower."
These words filled Zal with longing, and he found himself unable to sleep as he constantly thought about her beauty. Now, when the day dawned, he opened the doors of his court, and the nobles stood about him, each man according to his rank. And presently there came from Cabul Mihrab the king to tender morning greeting to the stranger without his gates. And Zal desired that Mihrab should crave a boon at his hands. Then Mihrab said unto him,
"O ruler mighty and great, I have but one desire, and to bring it to pass is easy. For I crave thee that thou dwell as guest beneath my roof, and let my heart rejoice in thy presence."
Then Zal said unto him,
"O king, ask not this boon at my hands, I pray thee, for it can in no way be accomplished. The Shah and Sam would be angered should they learn that I had eaten under the roof of Zohak. I beg of thee ask aught but this."
When Mihrab heard these words he was sorrowful, and bent low before Zal, and departed from out the tents. And the eye of Zal looked after him, and yet again he spake his praises. Then he remembered the king's daughter, and how beautiful she was. He became lost in thoughts and longing, and the days went by without him noticing. Now it happened that one morning, Mihrab left his palace and went to the women's house to visit his wife, Sindokht, and her daughter, Roodabeh. The house was like a beautiful garden, filled with colors and fragrances, and the two women were shining with beauty. When Mihrab saw Roodabeh, he was amazed by her loveliness and prayed for blessings upon her. Then Sindokht asked Mihrab about the stranger whose tents were outside their gates. She said,
"Please tell me, what kind of man is this white-haired son of Sam? Is he worthy of our respect or the throne?"
Mihrab replied,
"O my beautiful cypress, the son of Sam is a heroic man. His heart is as brave as a lion's, his strength is like that of an elephant. He is a generous Nile to his friends and a destructive crocodile to his enemies. Even his flaws turn into virtues, and his white hair only adds to his glory."
When Roodabeh heard these words, she fell in love with Zal and couldn't eat or rest. She was like someone who had transformed. After a while, unable to bear the burden of her secret any longer, she confided in her loyal slaves. She begged them not to tell anyone and asked for their help in calming her troubled heart. The slaves were filled with fear upon hearing her story and pleaded with her to forget about a man who was rejected by his own father and branded among men. However, Roodabeh refused to listen to their advice. Seeing her determination, the slaves tried to find ways to assist her. And one of them, who was wiser than the others, spoke up, saying,
O beautiful one with a face like the moon, slender like a cypress, your wish shall be granted. Your servants will not rest or sleep until the young prince becomes submissive to you, like a footstool at your feet.
Roodabeh was pleased and replied,
If the outcome is favorable, a noble tree will be planted for you, bearing riches and jewels, and wisdom will harvest its fruits.
The servants then contemplated how they could achieve their goal, knowing that only through cunning could it be accomplished. They immediately dressed themselves in expensive clothing and happily went to the garden of flowers by the riverbank outside the city. They gathered roses and adorned their hair with blossoms, throwing them into the stream for divination. As they gathered, they reached a spot opposite Zaal's tents. Zaal noticed them from his tent and inquired about these gatherers of roses. One of the servants stood up and said to him,
They are slaves sent by the moon of Cabul to the garden of flowers.
Upon hearing this, Zaal's heart leaped with joy, and he went to the riverbank with only one page accompanying him. When he saw what a bird flying upwards, he took his bow and shot it through the heart, causing it to fall among the rose-gatherers. Zaal instructed the boy to cross the water and retrieve the bird. As he landed, the women with moon-like faces crowded around him, asking,
O young man, tell us the name of the one who aims so accurately, for he is truly a king among men.
The boy replied,
Do you not know the son of Sam the hero? There is no one in the world who matches his strength and beauty.
However, the girls rebuked him, saying,
No, do not boast in vain, for the house of Mihrab possesses a son that outshines all others.
The page smiled, and the smile remained on his lips as he returned to Zaal. And Zaal asked,
Why are you smiling, boy? What have they said to you that makes you open your mouth and show your teeth?
Then the boy told him what the women had said. And Zaal said,
Go back and tell them to wait, so they can bring back jewels along with their roses.
He selected pearl and gold trinkets from his treasures and sent them to the slaves. Then the one who had sworn to serve Roodabeh above all others asked if she could see the hero's face, saying,
A secret known by three is no longer a secret.
Zaal granted her request, and she told him about Roodabeh and her beauty, which only increased his passion. He said,
Please show me the way to see this beautiful woman, for my heart is filled with longing.
The slave replied,
Allow us to return to the women's house, and we will fill Roodabeh's ears with praises of the son of Sam, and we will ensnare her in our trap, and the lion will rejoice in chasing the lamb.
Zaal told her to go, and the women returned to the house, rejoicing and saying,
The lion has entered the trap set to catch him, and the wishes of Roodabeh and Zaal will be fulfilled.
But when they reached the gates, the porter scolded them for leaving while the stranger stayed in Cabul, and they were troubled and afraid for their secret. However, they calmed his anger and went to where Roodabeh was waiting for them. They told her about Zaal, the son of Sam, and his beauty and prowess. Roodabeh smiled and asked,
Why have you changed your tune? Earlier, you spoke scornfully of this youth raised by birds, whose head is adorned with the locks of a wise man. But now you praise him loudly.
Then Roodabeh secretly decorated her house to make it worthy of a guest. She hung brocades from Raum and carpets from Ind, and perfumed it with musk and ambergris, and caused flowers to bloom in the rooms. When the sun set and the doors were locked and the keys were taken away, a slave went to Zal, the son of Sam. She spoke to him in a low voice, saying,
"Come now, everything is ready."
Zal followed her. When they arrived at the women's house, Zal saw the king's daughter standing on the roof, and her beauty was like a cypress tree illuminated by the full moon. When she saw him, she welcomed him, saying,
I welcome you, young man, son of a hero, and may the blessings of heaven be upon you.
Zal returned her blessing and prayed to have a closer conversation, as he was on the ground and she was on the roof. Then the fair-faced woman let down her long tresses from the battlements to the ground. She said to Zal,
Here is a flawless rope. Climb, O Palaver, and grab my black locks, for it is fitting that I should be a trap for you.
But Zal cried,
No, fair one, it would be wrong for me to harm you.
And he covered her hair with kisses. Then he called for a rope, made a running knot, and threw it upwards, fastening it to the battlements. With a leap, he swung himself onto the roof. Roodabeh took his hand, and they descended together into the golden chambers, with the slaves surrounding them. They gazed at each other and realized their beauty surpassed all others, and the hours passed in sweet conversation, while love grew in their hearts. Then Zal exclaimed,
O beautiful cypress, perfumed with musk! When Minuchihr learns of this, he will be angry, and Sam will also scold me. They will say I have forgotten my God and will turn against me. But I swear to you that this life is worthless if it is not spent in your presence. And I call upon heaven to hear me, that I will only call you my bride.
And Roodabeh said,
I also swear this oath to you.
So the hours flew by, and the sound of drums announcing the arrival of the day came from the king's tents. Zal and Rodabeh cried out together,
O glory of the world, stay a little longer. Do not arrive so quickly.
But the sun paid no attention to their pleas, and the time to part had come. Zal swung himself from the battlements to the ground and left his beloved's house. Now, when the earth was flooded with light, and the nobles and chiefs had offered their morning greetings to Zal as usual, he gathered his mubids around him. He explained to them that he was deeply in love with a daughter of the serpent. Upon hearing this, the mubids became troubled, their lips sealed, and their words trapped on their tongues. None of them wished to taint this love with poison. Zal then rebuked them, promising to reward them generously if they would speak up. Reluctantly, they spoke and told him that a king's honor would not be diminished by a woman. Although Mihrab belonged to Zohak's lineage, he was noble and brave. They encouraged Zal to write to his father and request Sam's presence at the Shah's court. Then Zal called a scribe and asked him to write down the words he spoke. He told Sam about his love and fears. He also reminded him how he had been cast out and raised in a nest by a bird, surviving on raw flesh while his father lived comfortably in a silk-clad house. He remembered the promise Sam had made to him. He didn't try to justify what had happened. Then he gave the letter to a messenger and instructed him to ride until he reached Sam's presence. When Sam heard his son's words, he became troubled and cried out,
Woe is me, for now it is clear what has been hidden for so long. One who has been raised by a wild bird seeks the fulfillment of wild desires and desires union with a cursed race.
He pondered for a long time on how he should respond. He thought to himself,
if I tell him to abandon this desire, to not cause discord and to return to reason, I would be breaking my oath and God will punish me. But if I say that his desire is just and to satisfy the passions of his heart, what kind of offspring can come from the union of a deve and a bird's nursling?
Som's heart was heavy with worry. He then called upon his mubids to search the stars, saying,
if I mix fire and water, I am doing wrong and wrong will come of it.
Throughout the day, the wise men searched the secrets of fate and cast the horoscope of Zal and Rodabeh. In the evening, they returned to the king filled with joy. However, they found him torn with anguish. They said to him,
Hail to you, O Sam, for we have followed the movement of the stars and calculated their course. We have read the message of the skies. It is written, a clear spring will flow into the day, a son will be born to Zal, a hero full of power and glory, and there will be no one like him in Iran.
When Sam heard these words, his soul was uplifted, and he bestowed gifts upon the mubids. He then called for Zal's messenger, gave him pieces of silver, and instructed him to return to his master and say,
I consider your passion foolish, my son, but because of the oath I have sworn to you, it will be done as you desire. I will go to Iran and present your case to the Shah.
Sam then gathered his army and set off for Iran, with the sound of trumpets and cymbals preceding him. Now, when the messenger returned to Zal, he was filled with joy and praised God. He generously gave gold and silver to the poor and gifts to his servants. However, when night fell, he found himself unable to sleep, and during the day, he couldn't find rest either. He abstained from drinking wine and did not request any singers, for his heart was consumed with longing for his beloved. Soon, a slave approached him, and he entrusted her with Sam's letter to deliver it to Roodabeh. Roodabeh, upon receiving the letter, also rejoiced. She selected a valuable crown and a precious ring from her collection and instructed the woman to take them to Zal. As the woman left the chamber, she encountered Sindokht. The queen questioned her, saying,
Where do you come from? Answer all my inquiries truthfully, and do not attempt to deceive me, for I have long suspected your secret movements.
The woman trembled upon hearing these words and fell to her knees, kissing the queen's feet. She pleaded,
Have mercy on your humble servant, who is poor and earns her livelihood as best she can. I visit the homes of the wealthy and sell them robes and jewels. Today, Roodabeh purchased a tiara and a gold bracelet from me.
Sindokht then demanded,
Show me the money you have received for these items, so that my anger may be appeased.
The woman replied,
Please do not ask me to show you something I do not possess, for Roodabeh will pay me tomorrow.
Sindokht, realizing that these words were false, searched the woman's sleeve and discovered the tiara that Roodabeh had embroidered with her own hands. Then she became angry and ordered that the slave should be bound in chains. She also requested for her daughter to be brought before her. When her daughter arrived, Sindokht spoke, saying,
O moon of noble race, who has only been taught what is good, how have you strayed onto the paths of evil? My daughter, confide in your mother and tell me your secrets. Who is this woman, and for whom are your gifts intended?
After hearing this, Roodabeh felt ashamed, but eventually she revealed everything to Sindokht. Now, when the queen heard this news, she was shocked and afraid of the Shah's anger. She feared that he would destroy Cabul because of this unfortunate incident. Overwhelmed with sorrow, she went into her chambers and wept. Shortly after, King Mihrab entered Sindokht's room, feeling joyful because Zal had treated him kindly. However, when he saw her tears, he asked her about her sadness. She then explained to him that their daughter was deeply in love with Zal, the son of Sam. Upon hearing her story, Mihrab's heart also became troubled, as he knew that Cabul would not be able to withstand the Shah's wrath. Minuchihr was troubled when he heard these things, as he saw the plan of Ahriman in them and feared that this union would bring evil upon Iran. He instructed Norda to summon Sam before him. Upon hearing the Shah's request, Sam replied,
I obey, and the sight of the king will be a banquet unto my soul.
Sam then entered Minuchir's presence, kissed the ground, and blessed the Shah. Minuchihr raised him up and seated him beside him on the throne, and immediately began questioning him about the war and the deeds of Mazandaran. Sam recounted the entire story of his battles to him. Minuchihr listened with joy, despite the lengthy tale, and praised Sam's bravery. He raised his crown to the heavens and rejoiced that his enemies were defeated. A banquet was then prepared, and throughout the night, the heroes feasted and passed the time with wine. As the first rays of morning appeared, the curtains of the Shah's house were opened for him to hold audience and grant the petitions of his people. Sam, the Pahlavi, was the first to stand before the king, as he desired to speak to him about Zal. However, the Shah did not allow him to speak and commanded him to go back to battle. He ordered Sam to go to Cabul and burn the house of King Mihrab, completely annihilating his lineage and all who served him. The Shah declared that none of the descendants of Zohak should escape destruction, as he wanted the earth to be rid of this serpent brood. Upon hearing these words, Sam understood that the Shah was angry and that speaking further would be futile. He kissed the throne, touched the earth with his forehead, and said,
Lord, I am your servant, and I obey your desires.
He then departed, causing the earth to tremble under the footsteps of footmen and horses, and the city's air was filled with the darkness of his spears. Now the news of Sam's intention reached even to Cabul, and the land was filled with sorrow, and the house of the king was filled with weeping. But Zal was angry, and he went out to meet his father. And when he arrived at the place where he had set up his army, he requested an audience. And Sam granted it, and Zal once again reminded him of his promise, and asked him to spare the land of Cabul, and not bring his punishments upon the innocent. When Sam had finished listening, his heart was moved, and he said,
O my son, you speak the truth. I have been unjust to you since the day you were born. But hold back your anger, for I will surely find a solution, and your desires will be fulfilled. You shall deliver a letter to the Shah, and when he sees your face, he will be filled with compassion and cease to trouble you.
Then Zal kissed the ground before his father and asked for God's blessings upon his head. Sam dictated a letter to the Shah, in which he described all he had done for Minuchihr, how he had slain the dragon that had ravaged the land, how he had always defeated Iran's enemies, and how he had expanded the borders with his own hands. However, he was growing old and could no longer perform great feats. But he had a brave and worthy son who would follow in his footsteps. Only his heart was consumed by love, and perhaps he would die if his longing remained unfulfilled. And so, he entrusted Zal's affairs to the wisdom of the Shah. When the letter was finished, Zal embarked on his journey to the court, accompanied by the finest soldiers in his army. But the people of Cabul were greatly afraid of Minuchihr, and Mihrab wondered how he could appease the anger of the powerful king. He spoke to Sindokht and said,
Because the king is angry with me because of you and your daughter, and because I cannot face him, I will take Roodabeh to his court and kill her in front of him.
Perhaps his anger can be appeased in this way. Sindokht listened to his words silently, and when he finished, she thought of a plan, for she was clever. And once she had devised one, she returned to Mihrab's presence and asked him to give her the key to his treasury. For she said,
This is not the hour to be straight-handed. Suffer that I take what seemeth good unto me and go before Psalm. It may be that I move him to spare the land.
And Mihrab agreed to her demand because of the fear that devoured him. Then Sindokht went out to the house of Psalm, and she took with her 300,000 pieces of gold, and 60 horses caparisoned in silver, bearing 60 slaves that held cups filled to the brim with musk and camphor, and rubies, and turquoise, and precious stones of every kind. And there followed 200 dromedaries and 4 tall Indian elephants laden with carpets and brocades of ram. And the train reached for 2 miles beyond the king's gates. Now when Sindokht was come to Sestin, she bade the guardians of the door say unto Psalm that an envoy was come from Cabul bearing a message. And Psalm granted an audience, and Sindokht was brought into his presence. Then she kissed the ground at his feet and called upon heaven to shower down blessings on his head. And when she had done so, she caused her gifts to be laid before Psalm. And when Psalm beheld these treasures, he marveled and thought within himself,
How cometh it that a woman is sent as envoy from a land that boasteth such riches? If I accept them, the Shah will be angered. And if I refuse, perchance Zal will reproach me that I rob him of his heritage.
So he lifted his head and said,
Let these treasures be given unto the treasurer of my son.
When Sindokht beheld that her gifts were accepted, she rejoiced and raised her voice in speech. And she questioned Psalm, saying,
Tell me, I pray thee, what wrong have the people of Cabul done unto thee that thou wouldst destroy them?
Then answered Psalm the hero,
Reply unto my questions and lie not. Art thou the slave or the wife of Mihrab, and is it thy daughter whom Zal hath seen? If indeed it be so, tell me, I pray, of her beauty, that I may know if she be worthy of my son.
Then Sindokht said,
O Pale-Eva, swear to me first a great oath that thou wilt spare my life and the lives of those dear unto me. And when I am assured of thy protection, I will recount all that thou desirest.
Then Psalm took the hand of Sindokht, and he sware unto her a great oath, and gave her his word and his promise. And when she had heard it, she was no longer afraid, and she told him all her secrets. And she said,
I am of the race of Zohak, and wife unto the valiant Mihrab, and mother of Roodabeh, who hath found favor in the eyes of thy son. And I am come to learn of thy desire, and who are thine enemies in Cabul. Destroy the wicked, and those who merit chastisement, but spare, I pray thee, the innocent, or thy deeds will change day into night.
Then spake Psalm,
My oath is sacred, and if it cost my life, thou and thine and Cabul may rest assured that I will not harm them. And I desire that Zal should find a wife in Roodabeh, though she be of an alien race.
And he told her how that he had written to the Shah a letter of supplication such as only one in grief could pen, and how Zal was absent with the message, and he craved her to tell him of Roodabeh. But Sindokht responded,
If the Pehliva of the world can bring joy to his slaves, he will come to us and see our moon with his own eyes.
And Sam smiled and said,
Be at ease and let go of your worries, for everything will happen as you wish.
When Sindokht heard this, she said goodbye and hurried back. And Sam gave her many gifts and told her to leave in peace. And Sindokht's face glowed brightly, like the moon during an eclipse, and hope returned to her heart once again. Now, let me tell you what happened to Zal while all these events were taking place in Seistan. When he arrived at the court of Minuchihr, he quickly went into his presence and kissed the ground at his feet, then lay down before him in the dust. When the Shah saw this, he was moved and instructed his servants to lift Zal up and sprinkle musk in front of him. Zal then approached the throne and handed the king the letter written by Sam, the son of Nariman. After reading it, Minuchihr felt sorrowful and said,
This letter, written by your father Sam in his grief, has stirred up an old pain within me. However, for the sake of my loyal servant, I will grant you your request.
Yet I request that you stay with me for a short time so that I can seek advice about you. Then the cooks brought out a table made of gold, and Zal was seated next to the Shah and all the nobles in order of their rank, and they ate meat and drank wine together. Then, when the darkness of night had covered the earth, Zal mounted his horse and traveled across the land in a state of restlessness, for his mind was filled with thoughts and his mouth with words. But when morning came, he presented himself before the Shah in an audience, and his speech and demeanor pleased the Shah, who then summoned his wise men and instructed them to consult the stars regarding this matter. For 3 days and 3 nights, the Mubids tirelessly searched the heavens. On the 4th day, they returned to the Shah and spoke, saying,
Hail to you, hero of the golden girdle, for we bring you good news. The son of Sam and the daughter of Mihrab shall be a magnificent couple, and their union will give rise to a son as mighty as a war elephant. He will conquer all men with his sword and elevate the glory of Iran to the highest heights. He will eradicate the wicked from the earth, leaving no place for them. Segsars and Mazandaran will feel the force of his mace, and he will bring great sorrow upon Turan. However, Iran will flourish under his rule, experiencing abundant prosperity.
And he will restore sleep to the unhappy, and close the doors of discord, and block the paths of wrongdoing. The kingdom will rejoice while he is alive, Raum, Ind, and Iran will engrave his name on their seals. When the Shah had heard this, he instructed the Mubids to keep secret what they had revealed to him. And he summoned Zal to question him and assess his wisdom. And the wise men and the Mubids sat in a circle, and they posed these questions to the son of Sam. And the first person spoke.
I have seen 12 trees, well grown and green, fair and lofty. Each tree has 30 branches and does not wither or grow weak in the kingdom of Iran.
Zal thought for a moment and replied,
There are 12 months in a year, and each month is like a new king on a throne. Each month lasts for 30 days.
The second person asked,
Tell me about 2 horses, one black and one white. They race endlessly but never reach a finish line.
Zal thought again and answered,
The 2 horses represent day and night. They constantly chase each other, but neither can win the race.
The third person asked,
I see 30 knights passing by the king, but then one disappears and the 30 are back again. Explain this.
Zal replied.
The 30 nights represent the 30 days of a month. When a month ends, one day's gone, but then a new month begins.
The fourth person asked.
In a green garden, a strong man with a sickle cuts both dry and green plants without any emotion. What does this mean?
Zal answered.
The man with the sickle represents time. Time does not show mercy to anyone, young or old. It cuts down everything, regardless of rank or love.
The fifth person asked.
2 cypress trees grow from the sea. A bird builds its nest on one tree at night, but flies to the other tree at dawn. The abandoned tree dies, while the other tree continues to bloom. Explain this.
Zal thought for a moment and replied.
The cypress trees symbolize the balance of day and night. When the sun moves from the constellation of Aries to Libra, darkness overpowers light. This shows that happiness or sorrow depends on the position of the sun.
The sixth person asked the hardest question.
I found a town built on a rock. The people left and built new mansions on level ground. Then an earthquake destroyed the town, and they longed for their rock-built town. Explain this.
Zal pondered for a while and then said.
The rock-built town represents the eternal world, while the thicket symbolizes our temporary life. We experience pleasure, pain, dreams, and struggles in this temporary world. Time and natural disasters remind us that we must leave our earthly possessions behind. Our name may endure, but we will pass away. This is the nature of life.
After Zal answered all the questions, the Shah and the assembly praised him. They celebrated with a grand banquet and drank wine until they were intoxicated. The next morning, Zal asked to be dismissed, but the Shah requested him to stay for another day to test his strength. Zal showcased his prowess in archery, spear throwing, and wrestling, impressing everyone. The nobles cheered and applauded, and the Shah rewarded Zal with gifts. The Shah then wrote a letter to Sam, expressing his approval of Zal and assuring his safety. When Zal returned to his father with the letter, Sam was overjoyed. They prepared to depart for Cabul, and a messenger was sent to inform Mihrab. Upon hearing the news, Mihrab dressed his army in festive attire, and the city was adorned with colorful banners and filled with music. Sindokht shared the good news with Roodabeh, and they decorated their house with luxurious carpets and thrones. And they watered the ground with rose water and wine. Then, as the guests approached Cabul, Mihrab went out to greet them. He placed a crown of diamonds on Zal's head, and they entered the city in triumph. The people paid homage to them, and Sindokht welcomed them at the doors of the king's house. She poured out musk and precious stones before them. Sam, after acknowledging their homage, smiled and turned to Sindokht. He said,
How much longer do you plan to hide Roodabeh from our sight?
Sindokht replied,
What will you give me to see the sun?
Sam answered,
I will give you anything you desire, even my slaves and my throne.
Sindokht then led him behind the curtains. When Sam saw Roodabeh, he was speechless with awe. Her beauty surpassed his wildest dreams, and he struggled to find words to praise her. He asked Mihrab for her hand, and they formed an alliance according to tradition and the law. The lovers sat on a throne, and Mihrab read out a long list of gifts that was too extensive to be heard in one sitting. They then proceeded to the banquet, where they feasted for 7 days without pause. After a month, Sam returned to Seistan, and Zal and Rodabeh followed him. He quickly went back to battle, leaving the kingdom in his son's hands. Zal ruled wisely and justly, with Rodabeh by his side on the throne. He placed a golden crown on her head,